Smile. Welcome, everyone. Namaste and Sairam. First, we'd like to thank in advance the Lord and the saints and angels who are going to be helping us today. God is the doer, and each one of us is his instrument. The title of today's program is Victors, Not Victims. I'm Connie Shaw, and this is my husband, Jim Wright. We're so glad you could join us. In addition to quantum gazing, which will last 5 minutes, and a 10-minute meditation, we have a dozen powerful practical resources for you, primarily around the topic of clearing shock and trauma. We also have some teaching stories and instructional modules, as well as 3 remedies. First, Jim is going to lead the induction to quantum gazing.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, all over the world. We have people from Asia and Australia and the United States, Mexico, South America,
Europe,
and Europe,
and the UK.
the UK proper, all over the world. So we welcome all of you. We're so glad you're here. If you are not sitting cross-legged on the floor, would you please place your feet flat on the floor, and if everyone would please take your hands, place them face up in a receptive position, and put them face up on your thighs or in your lap, whatever is most comfortable, but face up in a receptive position. Now, many of you have already done forgiveness work today, thinking about those whom you need to forgive and who you would like to forgive.
Like to have forgive you, yes.
And who you would like to have forgive you. Exactly. So that's always a part of what we're doing here in gazing. Now, if you would think of 3 or 4 wishes, prayers, or intentions that you have for yourselves or your loved ones, for good things you'd like to have come into your or their lives, or some negative things that need to be drawn away. It might be a pain or illness that needs to go away. It might be health and healing that needs to come in. The kinds of things can be any kind. It can have to do with your health in your body, with your emotional state, or how emotional you generally are. It can have to do with your relationships with anyone, with family members, with friends, with coworkers, anyone at all. It can have to do with your spiritual life and your life purpose, with your service activities, with your leadership roles, anything at all. So take a little time and get these 3 wishes or 4 wishes, whatever, clearly in your minds. Now, when we are gazing with Connie, and I'll be on the screen too, just look into her eyes with a soft, almost unfocused look. There's no need to stare. There's no need to try to transfer any energy back and forth. Just a soft, easy look.
And just to clarify, Jim and I will both be doing gazing today together.
Now, while you are gazing, let your mind become totally blank. Let all the thoughts drain away. Allow your mind to be a blank screen. And if you notice yourself having some thoughts while you're gazing, it's perfectly okay. You don't have to chastise yourself. Just allow your mind to go blank again and continue gazing. Now, in preparation for gazing, we always do a breathing exercise in which we breathe our consciousness down into our spiritual heart center, right in the middle of our chests. And at the end of our out breath, we notice the particular feeling that we have when our consciousness reaches that point. That's the point at which we are making a connection with all that is. We're making a connection with any special people we are thinking of. And sometimes they actually feel that something has happened. They might have a little shudder or something goes on. So let's begin right now. We'll do this 3 times. Let's breathe in deeply. Now let's breathe our consciousness down into our heart space. And now notice the feeling in your heart when you're at the end of your breath, that special feeling when your consciousness is connected with your heart. Let's do that a second time. Breathe in deeply. And consciousness down into your heart center. Notice that feeling. And a third time. And down into your heart center. Now let's take one more breath in. And now breathe your consciousness out into the universe, connecting with your idea of the quantum field of love.
And gazing will take about 5 minutes.
Now, if you have photos of loved ones, you might have laid them out on the floor, or you might be holding them up. If you aren't yet, now's a good time to put them up. And you can hold them up during all of gazing. And we'll begin right now.
Thank you. And now Jim is going to say a word about meditation.
If you happen to be holding up any photos of your loved ones, you can put them down, and we will be meditating for 9 or 10 minutes. The masters have said that they would like to continue working with you. They've been working with you ever since you came into your room and sat down, and they'd like to continue working with you intensively for a little bit longer, and they suggested that we all meditate together during that time. So we'll do that.
And we'll start with 3 ohms.
And Connie and I will be leaving the screen.
But we'll be here with you.
We'll be here with you, and we will be coming back.
Ready?
So when are we going to
It's
start?
27. 17 to 27.
Okay.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Now would be a good time for you to jot down your notes from gazing and the meditation. You might want to keep your notebook handy because we're going to be giving a lot of information. Due to the prevalence of pneumonia and flu these days, many people worldwide have had phlegm in the lungs. So I'm going to share a remedy that I use called the Mucus Breakdown Remedy by Motivational Doc. As you can see, the remedy uses a cup of pineapple juice, a teaspoon of minced ginger or half a teaspoon of ground ginger, a quarter teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and 1 teaspoon of honey. You just mix it up and drink it as often as necessary, or 3 times a day to reduce phlegm. This works very, very well. Now we'd like to give our disclaimer that we're not medical doctors and we don't diagnose or prescribe. We provide resources for educational, inspirational, and research purposes. This video is protected by the U.S. Constitution and is not intended to harm, to bully, or to harass, but merely to inform. The next thing we're going to talk about is black swan events. The reason we entitled this program Victors, Not Victims, is because everybody has had black swan events in their lives, and we thought we would just address this. It's probably karma in most cases, and we also have a sign for this on black swan events. Black swan events are rare, unusual, surprising, and potentially devastating circumstances or processes that come into a person's life that require adjustment. It could be a disease, an accident, a relocation, a death of a loved one, a divorce, or an assault, or it could even be a loss of job or career. Now we're going to talk about the ways that black swan events can occur. They're usually unexpected, as we said, and they are rare. There can be national or local black swans that are group or nation black swans, such as the Great Depression in the U.S., or globally the CV, or earth changes such as hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, landslides, tsunamis, or volcanic eruptions. Now, even if people are not directly disabled or made homeless due to population black swan events, there can still be a life-changing emotional reaction to it unless people receive trauma counseling or spiritual healing. Countless people have written us to say that they have, very surprisingly and gratefully, been cleared of black swan, they didn't call them black swan events, but of traumatic events during gazing. And they just wanted to let us know that that had happened, and we are thrilled that the Lord and the Masters are doing this for people. One of my first black swans happened when I was 12 years old, and my parents and siblings and I were flying from Frankfurt, Germany, where we had been living, to our new home in Washington, D.C. It was about midnight, and I was too excited to go to sleep, so I was watching the stars outside the plane window beside me. My younger sister was sleeping in the seat beside me, and the rest of the family were spread out around the plane. We were over the North Atlantic in a 4-engine plane, and then suddenly I noticed flames leaping out of the engine right beside my window. I leaned into the seat opening to whisper to my mother, who was sitting beside me with my younger brother. "Mom! Mom! The plane's on fire! look at the engine! Look at the engine beside my seat! Flames are coming out of the engine! We should tell the captain!" She replied, "No, Connie. Planes just don't catch on fire in flight. The engine is not on fire. Now just be quiet and go to sleep." But Mom, sleep. Well, I was wondering, how do you convince people of danger who just won't listen? I've asked myself that very question hundreds of times ever since. About a minute later, the PA system came on, and the pilot said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Mike Rogers. Unfortunately, we're going to have to make an emergency landing in Gander, Newfoundland, Canada, due to an engine malfunction. There's nothing to worry about, but make sure that your seatbelt is securely fastened and that your small luggage is safely towed under the seat in front of you. Parents, if the oxygen masks descend, please secure your own first and then place them around your children. If we have to make an emergency landing, everybody bend over and cover your head with your arms. Stay in your seats and brace for landing." Then the overhead lights went on and words spread throughout the cabin. "Wake up! Wake up! It's an emergency!" And then I heard people praying, "Oh, please help us, God. I'm too young to die like this in a plane crash." And then other people were saying the rosary. Some people were chanting. And then I heard someone say, "Oh, God, please help us. I'll be a good person from now on if you just get us through this." Well, meanwhile, since this was the most thrilling thing that had happened to me in my entire 12 years on Earth, I wasn't going to miss a single bit of it. And so I took in all the sights and sounds, looking up and down the aisle, looking out the window, just wondering, are we going to die? And if we're going to die, I wonder what that will be like. Well, half an hour later, we landed at the tiny airport in Gander, and all the sleepy passengers descended from the airplane with their pillows, blankets, hand luggage, and teddy bears, where we spent the next 8 hours sleeping in the lobby chairs of the airport until another plane could be sent from the States to take us to D.C. As we all sat in the airport lobby, we marveled at our good luck having been so near land when the engine fire had broken out, instead of over a more remote section of the North Atlantic with no land in sight. You know, that event did not dampen my love of travel, nor the love of travel of most of the members of our family. And since then, I've traveled in 60 countries totally safely and have lived in 4 countries and have flown hundreds of times. That's no exaggeration. My brother Rod, however, who was on the flight, dislikes flying to this very day. So you can see that black swans affect different people differently.
Now, when I was about 15, a black swan accident occurred with me. I was a Boy Scout, and one Friday night, about 20 fellow scouts ages 11 to 15 went with our scout leaders out into the forest, and we pitched our tents on a Friday night, built some fires, and cooked our little dinners, and went to sleep for the night. And
It was raining, right?
not on Friday night.
Okay. Oh, I thought you said it was pouring rain. I'm sorry.
And then on Saturday, we did various kinds of activities, and in the afternoon, it began to rain very hard, and we didn't have enough wood for our evening fire. So I went out with an axe, not a little hatchet, but an axe. It had a handle that was, see if I can show that. It's about 2/3 of a meter long, and you held it up over your head and then whammed down on the log to chop. And so it was raining hard, and the wood was getting wet, and I had the axe up over my head, and I went wham down on the log, and the bark of the log was slippery, and the axe was angled a little bit, and the head of the axe bounced off and bounced right into my shin and cut a very deep
A wound?
wound into my shin, exactly. And
Was there blood spurting everywhere?
there was a fair amount of blood. So we can ignore visualizing that, but there was. And so I, quickly found the scout leaders, and they packed me in the car and took me to the hospital, where they put in 3 layers of stitches, 46 stitches in all. And I didn't, they just do a little anesthetic, a little local anesthetic, so it wasn't a big deal. But I was in shock. I mean, it was clearly a big deal to me. And then they, my parents had come to the hospital, and I was taken home. And I had been planning to go home that evening at any rate, because I was part of the local high school band playing French horn, and I had been planning to play a concert that night and then go back to scouting the next morning, trying to fill all my hours of all my days.
Just like now.
Yeah, and so I did in fact go and play French horn in the band concert, not nearly as well as I would otherwise have, but that was one of the Black Swan events that was most noticeable in my early life.
Well, thank you, Jim. And still today, you just keep trucking along and you don't let anything stop you. You're just unstoppable. Now, the next thing we're going to discuss is spiritual obstacles as opportunities in disguise. Most people, as I said, have plenty of black swans in their lives, and we also have spiritual obstacles. So you can see you might have grown up with difficult family members, or you might have had poor health, or a disability, or a disease, or perhaps you lost an organ or a limb, or you lived in poverty, or you had to do distasteful work or occupation, or you had physical, mental, or emotional attacks by enemies. It could be that you lived in a harsh climate, or that you were a minority as far as nationality, and you had a language barrier and felt inadequate or were mocked or teased because of that. You might have been homeless. You might have experienced earth changes. Perhaps you experienced plagues or house arrest or restrictions where you couldn't take part in your normal activities. Perhaps you were imprisoned. Maybe you were adopted or living in foster care, or with an abusive step-parent. And of course, not all step-parents are abusive. Most are very fine people who make great sacrifices for the children that they bring up. Perhaps you were divorced. Perhaps you experienced the loss of a spouse through dementia or death. Now, remember, if you have experienced any of these spiritual obstacles or similar ones, studies have shown that you are probably among the most resilient of human beings and have had innate leadership abilities, and you're usually a good problem solver with a good sense of humor. These people are fun and sometimes very funny and unstoppable, and as I said, leaders. There are no victims, just people learning self-created lessons to balance their karma on the road to self-realization. Now, as I said, spiritual opportunities are spiritual obstacles can be opportunities in disguise, and we choose different situations that we're going to meet before we come into this embodiment. As long as we don't end up being bitter, be better, not bitter, then we become anti-fragile, which means tough, resilient, and great problem solvers. Now, you may have read the book Anti-Fragile by the author Nassim Taleb. He is a very interesting writer, and we have enjoyed reading that book. Most people, however, don't clear their shocks and traumas, but they just soldier on valiantly. It's advisable to clear your trapped residue that builds up in the cells from trauma, from grief, and from shocks. This can easily be done by using the Bach flower remedy, known as the Star of Bethlehem, which was given by God to Dr. Edward Bach, MD, to balance the emotional body. There are 32 main remedies which address many emotions and conditions. You can get these online for very little money, and they have no expiration date, so you can save them for years. Star of Bethlehem clears shocks and traumas from conception to the present. Many attendees at Gazing have written to us to say that numerous emotional blocks have been cleared by God's grace during Gazing, and some of these are mentioned in our new podcast called Fireside Moments with Connie Shaw on YouTube. Now we're going to discuss Star of Bethlehem remedy. First of all, you can douse. If you know how to douse, then you can decide, you can find out how many days you need it or how many weeks you need it, how many times a week, and then for how many weeks overall. So number one, you take it, let's say you take it 3 times a week on awakening for 2 weeks.
How do you take it?
And you take it there in number 4 by taking 2 drops under your tongue 20 minutes before taking any food, drink, or brushing your teeth. And you can say, as you do that, number 2, I'm lifting all shock, trauma, and blocks from my cells and biofield. And you could also say number 3, I'm clearing all lifetimes now. So that would be a powerful decree to be able to reinforce its effects. And then celebrate your lightness. I have used Bach flower remedies for decades and have found them to be extremely, extremely beneficial. Now then, as I said, they're not expensive at all, and you can search them online. And Whole Foods Market oftentimes sells them, and other markets as well. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is laryngitis. There is a prevalence of laryngitis now. Now, the laryngitis remedy is something I've used many times for speaking, if I've lost my voice before speaking. And it can be used by speakers, singers, and actors, or for general use. So you cut a 1-inch piece of ginger and you chew it for 15 minutes. You swallow the juice, but you discard the fiber. That's very, very simple, and you'll find that it works quite well. On a different topic now, we're going to deal with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and some of the different symptoms or things that happen in nature before those. We're going to be having a lot of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions this year and next. There's a very good book on quake predictions called When the Snakes Awake by Helmut Tribuch. The library has it as well as Amazon. And now we're going to show, all right, there you have that. Do you know, speaking of quakes and volcanic eruptions, do you know which plant is an earthquake predictor? It's the heartleaf philodendron. Its leaves turn yellow or they drop off right before a quake. Also, another thing that's interesting to me, because it happens here a lot, is that wasps and bees come inside, even in the winter and even when there's snow on the ground. They somehow are alive. They come out of their nests and they come into the house. So I just say, now, little wasp or bee, I'm sorry you cannot be in here. So I'm going to go to the front door and hold it open. And I'd like you to fly along behind me and just fly outside. And they always do. So if you talk to them, since all creatures are sentient and most want to be cooperative and helpful, you can ask them to leave. You don't want to unnecessarily harm or kill any living being naturally. So that's something that you can try. Also, pigeons sit on wires by the dozen. You can have 70, 80, 90 pigeons sitting in a row on telephone wires before a quake. There are also more small plane and helicopter crashes, and earthworms can appear massively on lawns and sidewalks before quakes and solar flares. And they can even climb up steps, which is very interesting. I hadn't known that. Ant invasions can come into your house before a solar flare or before a quake or volcanic eruption. Now, when you see them and then you see that they leave, then, and they will leave, and you don't need to hurt them in any way, then they will, after 12 to 24 hours after they leave their nests, a quake will happen. So that's a very good indicator. Also, a solar flare could happen right after that. Now, earthquake clouds are good indicators of quakes and volcanic eruptions, and they are usually iridescent. That is, they have rainbow hues within them. They're very high and thin, and they have wispy little edges, very feathery edges. So remember, in regard to quakes, it is not the magnitude or Richter rating of the quake, but the frequency that disturbs people. And I wanted to say, too, that there are probably over 100 symptoms that people have before quakes and solar flares and volcanic eruptions occur. One of the things that happens that's very shocking and that we all need to know about is that people that are bipolar or who are schizophrenic or have mental or emotional problems or who are taking medications oftentimes act out extremely. For example, some people will become very angry and volatile. Road rage happens at this time. And furthermore, there are lots of cases of domestic violence, and I hate to say this, also homicide and suicide. This also happens at the full moon and during CMEs, or coronal mass ejections. So it really pays for us to be more attuned to the moon, the sun, Mother Earth, the sky, and all the creatures around us, because they're all giving us signs and symptoms all the time. A very good quake site is this one, emsc-csem.org/earthquake/. And there is another wonderful site called Space Weather. www.spaceweather.com is really excellent. Now, in closing, we've covered many powerful practical subjects today. We give our deepest love and thanks to the Lord and His company of heaven for blessing, shifting, and clearing you and your loved ones through surrogacy photos. Your loved one could be thousands of miles away on the other side of the earth or in an airplane. And if you hold up their photo during gazing, the masters know all about them, where they are, and they can work on them wherever they are. So, as a quick review, so that we can have you implement the many resources we've given you, this is what we've covered today. Modules on black swans, what they are, what they mean, spiritual obstacles as opportunities, how to overcome them, and also we've told you some teaching stories on my emergency landing black swan, Jim's gashing his leg black swan. Then we've talked about the mucus breakdown remedy by Motivational Doc, what it means to be anti-fragile, also the Star of Bethlehem remedy for shock. And I wanted to mention, too, that although many of you have devices that do an automatic blocking of blue light blockers look like this. They're orange glasses. You can get them online. There are many brands, and they're very inexpensive. So they prevent eye damage due to excessive blue light coming from devices, from TV, from a movie screen, and your phone. The next thing we talked about is the laryngitis remedy, which works very well. And then we recommended to you the book, When the Snakes Awake by Helmut Trebuch. Links to our favorite Earth site quake and the solar site were given. And also, we talked about several common events that predict earthquakes, solar events, and volcanic eruptions. Remember, you're not the body, mind, personality complex, not the emotions, but all of us is Atma, Holy Spirit, and you are love itself. Everyone is love itself. We are here to alleviate the suffering of people around us. You are divine, and so are all beings. We hope that you'll enjoy exploring and experimenting with your friends and loved ones using these powerful tools and remedies as you create more meaning and purpose in your lives through selfless service. Sairam and Inshallah, which means God willing, Inshallah, we will see you next month.